Welcome to SaaS Therapy. My name is Casey Trujillo, and this is the show dedicated to help you save your most important relationships, your customers. This is our session, our podcast, when we do the homework from our longer podcast that's released on Tuesdays. If you have listened or have not listened to the episode on monthly active usage, this is the recap homework around that. And it was a fantastic conversation where I had the privilege of interviewing Todd Kirk, who's one of my co-hosts. If you've been listening to the podcast, Todd's been in this business for some time, and he constantly works with SaaS vendors in helping them create a user experience that motivates their end users, the customer's end users, to actually go and do something with the software. But during this time, Todd has discovered that SaaS vendors sometimes mistakenly put monthly active usage as the silver bullet. It's a great indicator. It's something that you should have, but it is not the silver bullet. And that's in the podcast that we go through this in more in depth. You will hear Todd explain what people in the market are calling the watermelon theory. If you haven't heard it, it is so good. Tell me if this has ever happened to you. You have an account that by all signs, all indications, they are green, meaning they are likely to renew. If you were to look at your monthly active usage, if you were to look at those type of KPIs associated with MAU, and again, every SaaS vendor is different. It might be that, hey, someone's logged in the last 30 days and they've performed 3 or more actions, or the last 90 days and they've performed 6 or more actions, or they've once a month they do at least 2 actions. Again, your monthly active usage and how you define it varies across customers. But let's say that the majority of the licensed users are performing those monthly active usage. You're like, this is green. You tell your manager, hey, this is going to happen. And then 60 days out, you receive a notice that the customer's telling you that they're not going to renew. And you're like, what? How are we not renewing? So the watermelon theory is it's green on the outside, but when you cut into a watermelon, it's beautifully red on the inside. And our accounts are sometimes like that, where all indications let us know that we should be able to have a renewal or we should be able to do an upsell, only to come find out that the customer says, you know what, this wasn't a fit for us. So as we talk about in this podcast, you are going to learn about what we call the ladder. And the ladder is to say, okay, monthly active usage is fantastic, but how do I get to business realization or value realization? How do I get to those business outcomes that the customer cares about, that helps them renew, that helps them to be upsold, right? So we call it the ladder. And it's as simple as it sounds, is a ladder has many steps. And the goal is to get up to the higher steps because that's where the ladder actually has value, right? So I'm going to give you a brief synopsis in this homework assignment of how that homework goes. So let's say you sell your SaaS software to an organization. Usually your customer's first goal is to say, let's not disrupt the business. How do we make this transition from the software that we were using or the previous way of working and moving over to your software? How do we make this as simple as possible? So maybe your first goals in working with your customer is, hey, let's not disrupt the business. Let's make this as simple as possible. So you're doing a lot of education. You're doing a lot of maybe some virtual instructor-led training sessions. You're just trying to get as many people to log in as possible, change the way they're working with your new platform. But you're really at that first step of the ladder, right? Okay, from there, you might then say, okay, how do we then set a goal around education? Meaning that we want a certain amount of users to go in and take education. That might be the next step of the ladder. So we have users in, but now we want these users to actually learn more about the software application, not just do the bare minimum, but actually start to increase their understanding. Well, then from education, obviously the education should lead to an adoption goal. So this is where we start getting into those monthly active usage goals that your manager sets for you. We want them to perform these functions or do these things. And in the first 6 months, we're hoping to get 50% of the licensed users to have adopted your software in these 3 or 4 areas. That's the problem. That's where it stops. And we're barely at the middle of the ladder. Where we next need to go is, what is the use case goal? Why did they actually buy your software? So let's say you're a collaboration software and your goal is to increase virtual meetings by a certain percentage. Maybe you have a collaboration software and it's to increase the amount of collaborations across different units? What's a measurable use case that you can say, okay, we've now done this because we've installed the software, because people know about the software, because they've started to adopt the software. This is a use case that is now helping us, right? Okay, you're not done yet. From the use case, you now want to go to a focus area where, because we've increased virtual meeting or because we've increased collaboration, we've been able to reduce down travel costs by 15%. And we've also found a way to reduce out other duplicate applications or workflows. Focus area. Okay, what does it mean that we're now having virtual meetings? What does it mean that we're now collaborating? What does it mean now that my users are doing this? What are they not doing? What have they increased in productivity? How do we tie this to a bigger area, a bigger goal? And that's the focus area goal. But we're still not at the top of the ladder. Where we get to the top of the ladder is where we have now mapped what we're doing to an organizational goal. So let's say you're working with a customer and the CFO has said, hey, we need to cut costs by 5% across the company. You can now see that you've now contributed to that. So if we were going to go from the top down, the organizational goal was cut costs by 5%. The focus area is we reduce travel costs by 15% and maybe reduce down some duplicate apps or some redundant processes. That came from because we had a use case of increasing virtual meetings. That came because we had an adoption increase because we focused on how to hold virtual meetings. That happened because of our education goal, and that happened because we installed the software and people started to use it. Now, the great tip that Todd gives you is if you're starting at the top where the goal is 5% across the company, you're asking your POC, how do we contribute to that? How would we do that? What are the things that we need to do to help participate in that organizational goal? If you're starting at the bottom, you're asking the question of why. Why do we need to use this software? Why is this important? So if you're starting at the top, how do we contribute? If you're starting at the bottom, why is this important? And by working both areas, you're going to see that you're going to actually drive to business value. You're actually going to help your customers be able to quantify that and be able to see this is essential for our organization to keep this software. So monthly active usage, great indicator. It has some tremendous value, but that's the problem is we stop there. We don't keep connecting the dots. And hopefully with this ladder framework, you'll be able to see where you're sitting with your customers. So go to the full podcast, learn more from Todd Kirk. He's an expert. Again, like us, follow us, subscribe to us on the podcast of your choice. But thank you for being part of this session of SaaS Therapy in helping you keep your most important relationships, your customers. Thank you.